Hey everybody, it's concrete5. We're going to talk a little bit about sample content and starting points in 5.5, and we're going to field questions from all of our core team here in Portland, Oregon. So starting off, this is, you're probably pretty familiar with this. This is the installation page of Concrete5 in version 5.5. And what we're specifically going to be talking about are these guys down here. And this is, we call this these kind of have two separate names. Sample content is kind of the legacy term for this stuff in Concrete5. So we used to have a section of the install that said install sample content or not. And now going forward, we're calling these things starting points. So when those two things are fairly interchangeable when we talk about them in the future. And a little bit of history. So at the beginning of Concrete5, when we started with this, we didn't even have the option for sample content. You just kind of got a stock configured site when you installed Concrete5. And I can give you an example of how we did that in Concrete 5.2.1. This is our install.php script, and there's lots of different stuff happening in here. This is the part of the installation process that actually installs Concrete 5 and the sample content. So this is all PHP. We use Concrete 5's built-in PHP functions to add page types, add the home page, add the attributes here. We add them to page types. Basically, we install the block types. Basically, everything about the installation process used to be scripted through PHP. And the reason we did that was at the beginning it was kind of useful because it proved that we could make a site completely from scratch using our API, which was kind of important for us to make sure that there were no empty corners in terms of, oh, you can't actually use Concrete5's PHP functions to build a dashboard page or something like that. So that's sort of why we started this way. And it worked pretty well. The one major problem with this was is not extendable at all. So anytime if Franz came back and said, hey, I want to add 2 more pages to the sample content and I want to change the way they link to each other and add a couple files and show off these new block types, that would mean at least an afternoon or more of messing around with this PHP. And only a really experienced developer could do that, and it meant a lot of trial and error, and it was just kind of a pain in the neck. So in 5.4.1 we changed this. We said, it would be awfully nice if we could create a site, and then instead of we could create a site, we could have content people work on the site, then we could just export the database and put the database in place during the installation. And so that's sort of what we did there. Unfortunately, while that is how we made it work, it sort of utterly failed in the does this actually solve the problem of making it easy, because we just traded in one bit of pain for the other. So for example, now you'll see there's 2 MySQL files here. One gets installed when you say no sample content, and the other gets installed when you say sample content. And in many ways this was actually worse, because you had to actually go through these files and make sure that the IDs match up for certain things. So whenever we added a new dashboard page to the site, in theory, you could just export it and then take some of the inserts and put them into the right place. But in reality, you had to swap out all dates for this now function in MySQL. You've got all these hard-coded English strings in there, and you have to make sure that these IDs match up in all the different tables where IDs are shown. It actually made it worse, I think. It did improve the performance of installation. That was another problem with install.php. It would sometimes time out on slower hosts because you're doing so much stuff through PHP here. This was a lot easier to import and a lot faster, but it definitely had all kinds of problems and was not extendable. And the promise of somebody working on a site, exporting it, and then having it ready to install was not realized. So with that in mind, we sort of went back to the drawing board for 5.5 and re-architected a completely different way to handle that stuff. And that is called starting points. And in 5.5, starting points are packages. So they don't live in the packages directory. Instead, they actually live in, I gotta go into here, concrete5. They live in this install directory. So here's the packages directory here. You can see we've got two folders. We've got one that's blank. That is this guy right here, empty site. And if I open up the controller.php there, you can see that this is a lot like a controller for a package. So you've got blank starting point package extends this starting point package class, and we'll go through that package class, extension of the package class in a second. So package handle is blank, and that works by mapping to this folder here, just much the same way. These are all found in packages, just the same way that they work from the front end of the site. And same way with standard. It's sample content with blog. The icon for blank is found there. There's no icon for sample content with blog, so we just use the standard concrete5 icon. And whatever you select here automatically gets installed. And the way that that installation works is...
One quick question.
Sure, yeah. And if anyone has any other questions, please just interrupt me.
Does the starting point package extend package?
It does.
Okay.
It does. Now, we haven't necessarily tested exactly what that might do in certain situations, because we don't use 90% of what the package has, but there's no reason why it couldn't. Mm-hmm. And it does. It does extend the starting point package. And so get package path, those types of functions do work, okay. And they are used fairly extensively. Yep. So by default, I will just sort of step through some of the components that live in this standard installation by default, and then we'll talk about how these things work actually. There's a files directory. This is optional. Any file placed within this directory will automatically be imported into concrete5 when you install this sample content. And then there is also a content.xml file. This is an XML file in a particular new format for 5.5 that, if you select this starting point, will install content into your concrete5 site. And we will get to how you can generate these from real sites in a second. So let's talk a little bit about these XML files. When you install concrete5, you'll notice that there's this this progress bar that happens, and we'll step through it right now. So what's actually happening here is we are running through a number of routines that are defined by default in that starting point package class. So first we create database tables, then we go through and we'll step through and read them as they happen. We install attributes, we install themes and block types, we import the files like I just mentioned, and all this stuff kind of happens. This can all be overridden by your custom starting point package if you need to. We don't have to do that for either of the ones that show up in the. We don't have to do that for either of the ones that show up in the core by default. But you could totally change how that installation happened by messing around with this controller.php file. So when it says something like installing themes or installing block types, what it's actually doing is going through these XML files in this base directory. And these are sort of common to any concrete5 installation, which is why we put them in one place. So when it says installing themes, what it's really doing is opening up this XML file and importing it in a special library in concrete5 that knows what to do here. And you're not necessarily going to have to know how all of the attributes and setup for and schema for these XML files behave, because there's a package that you can add to your concrete5 site that will export it in this format. So this is a representation of the type of stuff that this content import format deals with. and that's what we are. That's what this content.xml file here is in. So when you come into content.xml, like you'll see pages, you'll see attributes. You're not necessarily expected to sort of write that stuff by hand, but it is something you are meant to be able to read and potentially modify. So this is the content.xml file, which is installed when you install the homepage or the site without any sample content. So I didn't actually do that. I did the sample content with blog, but this is a really easy starting point. So when you install the site with no sample content, we install everything that's common to all concrete5 installations, and then we install a right sidebar page type, and then we install the home page, which is a page type of right sidebar. And that's the only thing we install content-wise. When we install the sample content with blog, we install a whole lot more stuff. We install a special block type, the date archive block that actually doesn't get installed unless you install the blog. We install some custom attributes here. The Greek yogurt theme gets installed. Some page types for blog entry, that kind of stuff. And then down here, you actually have pages and stacks and stuff like that. They get installed there. And basically the process for this is you go in, install concrete5 into an empty site, customize it how you want it, and then export this content in this format, and you'll paste it into your content.xml file. And that's sort of what I'm going to show you how to do. So I'll continue to my site. This is great. So I took the liberty of creating one of these starting points from scratch before we started this. And let's say you wanted to create a custom starting point for a concrete5 site, or swap out the one in the core. What you would do is first you would actually let's start from scratch. So what you're going to do is you're going to install this. You're going to install it to an empty site, and it will go through and create its tables. Which it is doing right now. Okay, good. And now what you want to do then is you might say, look, I'm going to add some content to this site. I'm going to add an image. That's annoying. And then I'm going to add some content. So let's say that was enough, and that's how you want your concrete5 site to look. Now what you do is you download the sample content generator package from the marketplace. And this is a free add-on. You install this on your concrete5 site, and then you click generate install data down here. And when you do that, you can click archive files, up here, and that will generate a zip file of all files found in your concrete5 site properly named. And the naming part is important, and we'll get to that in a second. So when you get to that, you unzip that guy, and you can see that the file, since there's only one file in there, it just decided to drop it into the directory, but that's okay. What you're going to do is you're going to just put this in a files directory in the root of your starting point package. And you can kind of see I've done that with one that I've started working on. This was from a site that had sample content generated where we had 3 images. Then you go back and you generate content.xml from the current website. And you'll notice now at this point we go through the entire concrete5 install and generate a full sort of XML description of the entire website. And now, since most of this stuff is common to all concrete5 sites, you don't really need to worry about it. And moreover, you don't want to just paste this file into content.xml. Probably you just get some unique errors because you'd be trying to add groups and attributes that already existed. So what you typically do is you paste it into a text editor, and then you find the stuff that you know you messed with. So we added, all we did was customize the home page. So I'm going to look for, oops, I totally just missed it. So now we have the home page right here, and you can see this is the content that makes up an XML description of the home page. So we've got a page type of right sidebar, we've got our image block added to the header area, and then we've got a content block added to the main area. So the goal with this isn't necessarily for you to be writing this stuff and remembering that you have to have an area and then a block and a data, all that stuff. The goal is to be able to cut and paste this stuff out of this resulting file and then perhaps tweak content, if you need to, and understand which thing you're linking to. So you'll notice this FID is going to be a number when we import it into the new site, but right now we have a special export placeholder that says we're going to use whatever ID this interoptics.net aspens.jpg gets when it gets imported into the site. So there's a couple different processes that happen. It imports files first, then it goes through this stuff, and it generally tries to keep everything in sync. So if we were building this into our content.xml, we'd just copy the home page and we'd open content.xml and paste it in there and make sure that it was set up right. And I have a simple example with a couple pages in this testing package that I have here. So this was one I made before we started this. We've added a full page type, we have a left sidebar and right sidebar page type, we have a home page, and then we have page 2. And it has a path. It links. They link to each other, and everything is happy.
So,
yes.
If you're actually doing this, you would probably start with the blank pages.
Totally. Yeah.
Content.xml.
Yeah. Yeah. Starting with the blank starting point is probably the best option. Just so there's less stuff in there that you have to keep track of. Because once you start adding some of this stuff, it does get pretty, the sample content with blog site is pretty easy for us to mess with and understand, but it's still pretty big. It's like 40K, so in terms of the XML, because there's a lot of repeating stuff.
And this is like for people to white label.
Yeah, they can white label using this. So yeah.
Sorry.
No, go for it.
I was just making sure. No, it made sense. When they do that, are you allowed to override the Greek yogurt, change the theme as well?
Yeah. You're able to put in anything you reference in terms of themes will work, whether it's in the concrete directory or in the root directory. You can also install packages using this thing, and if you notice anywhere in content.xml, you'll see a lot of empty package nodes in all this stuff. If something is referenced by a package, it will have something in here. So if this came from the calendar package, you'd have package equals the calendar handle here, and then there would be a node at the bottom that was packages, and it would say, yo, install the calendar package too. So you can export packages as well as part of this and install them all at the same time. which was one of the requirements of this whole thing. Yeah, so Robert brings up a good point. This is totally for white labeling, or well, this is for our benefit and for white labelers' benefits. So if I take this testing package, which I generated earlier, and I add it to my local install, I go into config, install, packages, and then I move testing in there. This is pretty basic stuff. So if I open controller.php, I've got testing starting point package, extends starting point package. It has a unique handle which matches the directory. It's got a name and a description. It's got files it's going to import, and then it's got a content.xml that references those files and some of its own content. And once I go in there, I will first make sure that all the permissions on this thing are set correctly, because I didn't earlier and it made my life miserable. Okay, that looks pretty good. So I can uninstall Concrete real quick. And speaking of white labeling, if you now come into this site, you can, whoops, I must not have set this up right. Oh, okay. Probably got to put it in the right spot, huh? So as far as white labeling goes, if you put in any special packages in your install directory, it totally takes away the ability to use the standard ones. And that was, you know, you could, I was kind of torn about that, but from a white labeler's perspective, I think that makes more sense, because they want the ability to control. If you're setting these starting points up in your root directory, I think you want the ability to completely lock down what types of content can be included.
Can they change the icon and whatnot?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. If they include icon.png in here, just like a package, it will show up here. So if they wanted to add the blank starting point in here, they could. They could just copy it into the root directory. So if I install using this.
So does that also work in the if you had starting points defined in the concrete folder themselves, like let's say you symlinked concrete to some central location on your server,
Yeah.
and then you could define custom starting points for all the sites on your.
Yeah, if you did that, you would have to. Yeah, you totally could.
Yeah.
You just have to put it in the shared location.
Yeah.
So this is almost done. Continue to site. And you can see that my custom testing sample content is in place. All of the various image references carried through. I've got a page list in here. I've got sidebar content, all this kind of stuff. This content format supports stacks. It supports global areas. It supports most content stuff in concrete5. The only stuff it doesn't currently support are users and groups, and that's probably just because we ran out of time, and there didn't seem to be that useful a reason to install users that way. But Robert also brings up a great point in that this is content.xml. Since it's content.xml, you can include anything in here that is normally included in these base XML files. So if I look in config, these are the standard config values for every site. So a white labeler might come into content.xml and down here and add something like config white label app name equals cement 6. Outrageous. And the white label logo src, and then the point to their own logo, and disable the background image, that kind of stuff. So all white labeling parameters can be set through the config nodes here in your sample content starting points, which is kind of handy for that
all
stuff.
All those get written as defines in your site.php?
No, this will only work for those parameters that are stored in app.php, and we use the get or define from the config
Yeah,
class.
yeah.
So certain things that we don't have that way, like advanced permissions, you
Right.
couldn't set here, which is too bad. So we've been talking about making advanced permissions something you could set through the UI. I think
Right.
then you'd be able to set those here, which totally makes sense for this type of thing. And then finally, before I ask if there are any questions, which there may or may not be, I'm going to rifle through some papers. It's always the best part of any presentation. Finally, there's so this is all happening within the installation. Within installation, you can reference these content import files in anywhere, particularly when you're installing a different kind of package. So let's say, for example, when you're dealing with the Natural Essence theme, you want to not only install the theme, you want to install a few pages with content on them. You could open up the controller, and within the installation script, you could add in lines like this.
More essence.
Import content file. So this would let you, if you exported content from a demo site, you could then import it when you installed this theme. And finally, we actually added a new parameter that we haven't really talked too much about because it's a little scary. This is called package allows full content swap. And what this means is this is primarily going to be used with the theme. If you install a theme or any package with that set to true, you are going to get an awesome warning when you install the theme that asks you, do you want to swap site contents with the one defined by this theme? And you might want to do this if you're, so many themes are really, really great when they're set up, but they look totally terrible when you install them right off the bat because they don't necessarily, you may have the new page types, but they haven't been applied to your site. The blocks haven't been set up on your site. Like, it just doesn't look as compelling as the demo. And a lot of sites, when they're installing this stuff, they haven't set up their site anyway, so there's nothing to be lost by installing a completely new set of content on top of their other site. So what this does is, if you say yes when you do this, it will remove all your site's content files, so like all JPEGs and PNGs that you've uploaded. It will remove all your front-facing pages and blocks, and then it will install from the content.xml file in that package whatever that thing says it should install.
Is this like themes that have that already built in?
Yeah, you have to specify that you support that, and then obviously this theme actually doesn't support it. I just added it, so if I were to say yes right now, I would just kind of screw up my site. But you can also install themes without saying yes, which is what I just did. And at that point, I think that's pretty much what this stuff is all about. Like, we set out to make it so that white labelers had a lot of tools to make their lives easy when they were building out sites that looked a proper way. We wanted to make it easy for us to build these things, so I think in the long term, we'd like to add a starting point section to our own site that bundles up a bunch of packages together and content and builds out the sites that look nice together. And this was sort of the first step toward making that stuff happen.
So, to run through the process of using this package, so you would create within the package that you're packaging to install the new sample content, or if you wanted to add additional sample content to the root, you would take a folder called install or config install.
Yeah.
And then you'd place your within a packages folder under the config install a named folder of your choosing for the thing with a description and its controller. And then for the content.xml, you would use the sample content generator package, and this doesn't contain actually the contents of your generated XML, but simply the modified pages that differ from base install. Right? So you're
Yeah.
not trying to reinstall attributes and stuff like that.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah.
The correct files in the files directory, and then that's.
Yep. Yeah, you have to go through the output of that full thing to make sure you only grab stuff that is new, with the exception of the home page, because the home page is installed by an earlier portion of the install process, and then it's sort of updated to look a certain way. Yeah, you totally got it right. The only sort of last thing, and it's sort of an advanced topic that we haven't really needed to do yet. This starting point package is basically the installation routine for all of concrete5, and by default, this is what your starting points extend. By default, it works this way, and you can see how we generate the install routines that show up when you're actually installing concrete5. First, we make the directories, then we install the database, and these are just functions that you define within this PHP file. So if you were so inclined, you could take your controller.php for your starting point package. You could start with the standard bunch of routines that we do in PHP to actually do to install a site, and then you could say, you know what, I'm not even going to install any single pages in my site. Like, I'm not going to install a login or register. Obviously, that's going to cause massive problems. But you could also you could override any of these functions from within your class. You could add in something afterwards, like starting point, install routine, install e-commerce, something like that.
I was going to ask you about that. Does it? Is there any way to? Does it handle it gracefully when package files are not found? Like, does it send you to the marketplace?
Probably
to
not.
buy
No, but that would be pretty sweet. No, it does not. Right now, it assumes if it can't find a package, it will probably just die.
Yeah.
It needs to have the package installed
Yeah.
before it can understand what you're trying to do. Yeah. So these are all just I guess I just leave it talking about like these. We haven't had to differ from the default starting point behavior. But since these are just classes that extend this class, you could completely change the way the installation process works for just one starting point. You know, you could override the install block types function here to install your own block types.xml if you had a whole bunch of block types that were new. You know, that type of stuff. It should be pretty easy to read and certainly much easier than before to modify.
So I have a couple of questions. Just to double check, like if I make a theme that I want that option, you know, like hey, install these, you know, new content, delete your old ones.
Yeah.
I have to package that theme with this sample content generator add-on, right?
No, you don't. All you have to do is you have to set up that theme on your own site, make your own site look exactly how you want it, and then install the content generator on your own site. Then run it on your own site. It'll make an XML file that you can then tweak. And once you've got that XML file looking the way you need it to look, you just drop your XML file into the root of your themes package. So, so you would just all you would end up here to add this to Natural Essence is you would add a
like after you got it looking the way you want it.
Exactly. After you generated it using the add-on on your own site. They don't need to have that installed at all. They just have to you just have to add its output to the root of your package.
It references like additional packages.
Yeah, any additional packages, files. If you've got files, you'd need to have. There's a content underscore files directory that you would put those files in. The same way there's a files directory in the root.
But as long as you have that new XML file, you put it in there, it'll ask that when they install it.
Yeah, it'll actually ask it even if you don't have it. So you have to specify it here, and you have to put the XML file in there as well.
Okay, and then when you I don't know how you could do it, but when you click yes, replace all my content, and that was by accident. Is there any fail safe
Well, when we delete pages now, we do move them to the trash, and that was actually one reason why we were really where we thought, well, we better implement the trash for this if we're going to have something like this. There's no trash for files, so you'd still have some potential challenges.
But there would be some way of. I'm just thinking of someone that would just click that by accident and oh no.
Yeah, I mean, we should add a timer into it. There's already a big yellow warning in front of it that's saying.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I just fear that people will still.
JavaScript confirmed.
Yeah. Are you sure? Really? Yeah. Yeah.
Really?
I could see someone,
No, totally. I mean, we tried to make it pretty fail safe, but it's definitely a concern.
Something you wouldn't want to do on an existing
Yeah.
site.
Are you thinking right now?
I really want to delete my entire site.
Yeah, you have to type it in there the way that cPanel makes you do it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Are you drunk right now? Oh.
I could see that being really useful for themes.
Yeah, I mean, so many of the themes are such a pain to set up, but they look really good when they are set up that it would save people a lot of time.
Very nice.
Cool. Well, that's basically what this is all about.
In the future, it'd be nice to right now, if I had to do it on my own, I would actually be lost. If I had a theme of how to do this, but it would be nice to have a how-to in the future for someone like me.
The how-to is actually already on the site. I put it up this morning. It looks like this, sort of. Yeah, so that should be on there. I'm going to attach this screencast to it, and we will call it good.
Right on.
Cool. All right, thank you.